People picture a caveman. He is hunched over, he has a club, his life is short, nasty, and brutish. He is lucky if he sees his 30th birthday. Then he gets eaten by a saber-toothed cat. That is the image we all have, and it is mostly wrong. The question of how long the first humans lived is simple. But the answer is not. It is a story about statistics, survival, and what it really means to be old. The big number you always hear is that early humans had a life expectancy of around 30 or 35 years. This is technically true, but it is also incredibly misleading. It is the single biggest reason for the myth of the short-lived caveman. Life expectancy at birth is an average. It is a statistical tool. It takes all the deaths in a population, from a baby who lives for 1 day to an old woman who lives for 70 years, and it finds the mathematical middle. The problem is that in the prehistoric world, an enormous number of people died in infancy or childhood. Think of it like this. Imagine a group of 100 people born in the Paleolithic. Maybe 40 of them die before they reach the age of 5. They die from disease. They die from difficult births. They die from accidents or predators. Another 10 might die between the ages of 5 and 15. So, right away, half of our group is gone before they even had a chance to become adults and have their own children. All of those zeros, ones, twos, and fives get thrown into the average. They drag the number way, way down. But what about the 50 people who survived? What about the ones who made it past the brutal filter of childhood? Their reality was completely different. If you were a human living 50,000 years ago and you managed to reach the age of 15, your chances of living to 40, 50, or even 60 were actually pretty good. You would not just drop dead on your 30th birthday. You would have already proven you were tough, resilient, and probably a bit lucky. Your life expectancy at that point was not 30. It was another 30 or 40 years on top of the 15 you had already lived. So, the first and most important thing to understand is this. The average lifespan was low, but the potential lifespan was not. Humans did not have a built-in biological clock that made them expire at 30. If they could avoid getting killed, they could live for a long time. The challenge was avoiding all the things that could kill you. And there were a lot of them. Before we talk about what killed them, we should be clear about who we are talking about. The term first humans covers a huge stretch of time and several different species. The story of lifespan changes as we evolve. Let's go way back. We can start with something like Australopithecus, the group that includes the famous fossil Lucy. They lived over 3 million years ago. They were not technically human in the way we think of our own genus Homo, but they were our ancestors. They were small, walked upright, but still had ape-like features. Life for them was incredibly hard. They were prey, they competed with a whole host of terrifying predators. For them, living past 30 would have been a real achievement. The fossil evidence is thin, but it suggests a life that was indeed quite short. They were just trying to survive on the savannah. Then things started to change. Around 2.5 million years ago, we see the emergence of Homo habilis, the handyman. This was a major step. They made and used the first simple stone tools. Tools meant a better diet. They could butcher carcasses left by other predators, getting at calorie-rich meat and bone marrow that was previously out of reach. A better diet means a stronger body, a bigger brain, and a better chance of surviving. Did their lifespan shoot up? Probably not dramatically, but every little advantage helped. They were still small, and they were still on the menu for many animals. The real game changer was Homo erectus. These guys were around for a very long time, from about 2 million years ago to just a few 100,000 years ago. They were taller, more like us. They made better tools, and most importantly, they likely controlled fire. Fire changed everything. It provided warmth, allowing humans to live in colder climates. It offered protection, keeping predators at bay during the night, and it allowed them to cook their food. Cooking makes food safer by killing parasites. It also makes food easier to digest and unlocks more nutrients. This was a massive nutritional boost. It fueled the growth of an even bigger brain. With fire and better tools, Homo erectus became a much more formidable creature. They were better hunters and were less likely to be prey. It is with Homo erectus that we start to see more convincing evidence of individuals living into their 40s. Life was still a daily struggle, but the odds were starting to shift in our favor. Next we have the Neanderthals, our famous cousins. They lived in Europe and Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. The stereotype of the Neanderthal is a brutish, stupid caveman. The evidence tells a different story. They were intelligent, sophisticated hunters, they made complex tools, clothing, and likely had some form of symbolic thought and language. And when it comes to lifespan, Neanderthals are fascinating. Their skeletons show that their lives were incredibly tough. Many are riddled with healed injuries, broken bones, head trauma, stab wounds. The skeleton of a typical adult Neanderthal often looks like that of a modern rodeo rider. They were getting up close and personal with huge, dangerous animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos. But the key word there is healed. They were breaking bones and surviving. This tells us two things. First, they were physically very robust. Second, and more importantly, they were likely taking care of each other. A person with a broken leg cannot hunt or gather. They would have starved to death if left alone. The fact that we find skeletons with severe healed injuries means that someone else was bringing them food and protecting them while they recovered. They had a social safety net. The most famous example is the Old Man of Shanidar, a Neanderthal fossil found in Iraq. This individual lived to be around 40 or 50 years old, which was a ripe old age for the time. And he had a brutal life. He had a crushing blow to his head that would have blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated or broken off above the elbow. He was also deaf and had a limp. Yet he lived for years, maybe decades, with these debilitating injuries. He could not have survived without the constant care of his group. This is not the behavior of animals living a short, brutish life. This is compassion. It shows that older, non-productive members of the group were valued enough to be kept alive. Finally, we get to our own species, Homo sapiens. We emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago. For a long time, our lifespans were probably very similar to those of Neanderthals. We lived in a similar way and faced the same dangers. We had slightly different technologies and perhaps more complex social networks, which might have given us an edge. But we were still hunter-gatherers living at the mercy of nature. The 30-year life expectancy skewed by infant mortality still applied. A person who survived childhood could expect to see their 40s or 50s. So how do we know any of this? Right? It is not just guesswork. Scientists have clever ways of teasing this information out of old bones and teeth. The field is called paleoanthropology. The most reliable way to figure out how old someone was when they died is to look at their teeth. Teeth are like a biological timeline. For children and teenagers, it is fairly straightforward. Just like kids today, ancient humans had baby teeth that fell out and were replaced by adult teeth. The adult teeth erupt in a predictable sequence. So if you find a young skeleton, you can look at which teeth are present to get a very accurate age. For adults, it gets a bit trickier. The main clue is tooth wear. Think of your teeth like the tires on a car. The more miles you drive, the more the tread wears down. Early humans were eating a diet that was tough and gritty. There was a lot of sand and dirt in their food. They also used their teeth as tools for gripping hides or softening materials. All of this wore down the enamel and the underlying dentin. By looking at the degree of wear on the molars, researchers can estimate a person's age. A young adult will have pointy cusps. A middle-aged person's teeth will be flattened. An old person's teeth might be worn right down to the gum line. It is not a perfect system, but it gives a good age range. Another method is to look at the bones themselves. Throughout childhood and adolescence, our long bones, like the ones in our arms and legs, grow from the ends at places called growth plates. When we reach our full adult height, these growth plates fuse to the main shaft of the bone. This fusion happens at predictable ages for different bones. The collarbone is one of the last to fuse, usually in the early to mid-20s. So, if we find a skeleton with an unfused collarbone, we know the person was a young adult at the latest. For older adults, it gets even harder. After about age 30, the skeleton does not change in such predictable ways. But there are still clues. The surface of a joint in the pelvis, called the pubic symphysis, changes over time. In a young person, it has a rough, billowed surface. As a person ages, it gets smoother and flatter and eventually develops a rim and signs of erosion. The end of the ribs that connect to the breastbone also change shape with age. By combining all these clues, teeth, bone fusion, joint surfaces, scientists can build a profile and estimate an age at death. It is almost never a precise number, but rather a range, like 35 to 45 years old. These bones also tell us the story of what life was like and what was likely to kill someone. The study of ancient disease and injury is called paleopathology. Skeletons are a record of the hardships people faced. We see evidence of nutritional stress during childhood. When a child experiences a period of severe illness or starvation, their bone growth stops temporarily. When they recover and start growing again, a thin line of dense bone called a Harris line is left behind. Similarly, problems with tooth enamel formation called enamel hypoplasia tell a similar story of childhood stress. Many prehistoric skeletons show these markers. Childhood was a perilous time. We see arthritis in the joints, especially the back, knees, and hands. This was a direct result of a physically demanding lifestyle of walking long distances, carrying heavy loads, and processing food and materials by hand. We see evidence of infections. A small cut from a flint tool could get infected and spread to the bone, a condition called osteomyelitis. Dental health was a huge problem. Although they did not eat sugar and did not get cavities like we do, the heavy wear on their teeth could expose the soft pulp inside, leading to horrific abscesses. Without antibiotics, a bad tooth infection could easily kill you by spreading to your bloodstream. And of course, there was violence. We find skulls with depressed fractures that match the shape of a club. We find spear points embedded in ribs and vertebrae. Competition for resources between groups was a reality of life. While it probably was not constant warfare, violence was certainly one of the many dangers people faced. Then there were the other dangers that leave no mark on the skeleton. Childbirth was a major killer of young women. A baby in a breech position or a postpartum hemorrhage would have been a death sentence for both mother and child. There were infectious diseases we cannot see on bones, like dysentery or pneumonia. There were predators, there was starvation when a hunt failed or a season was bad. There's simply the cold and the heat. Life was a constant tightrope walk. And yet, despite all of this, some people survived to be old. They did not just survive, it seems they were respected. Why would a group of hunter-gatherers living on the edge spend precious resources caring for an old, infirm person like the man of Shanidar? It seems counterintuitive. The answer probably lies in the value of knowledge. In a society without writing, the elderly were living libraries. They were the ones who held the accumulated knowledge of the group. An old woman would know which plants were edible, which were medicinal, and which were poisonous. She would know how to deliver a baby. An old man would remember the route to a hidden water source that only appeared during a severe drought. He would know the stories of the tribe, the laws, and the rituals. This kind of knowledge was not just useful, it was critical for survival. Keeping these elders alive was an investment in the future of the entire group. This idea is sometimes called the grandmother hypothesis. It specifically tries to explain why human females live so long past their reproductive years, which is rare in the animal kingdom. The theory suggests that postmenopausal women could significantly increase the survival of their grandchildren by helping to feed and care for them. This allowed their own daughters to have more children more quickly. By helping to raise the next generation, these grandmothers were ensuring their own genetic legacy continued. So being old became an evolutionary advantage. The world of these early humans was tough, but it was a world they were adapted to. Their bodies were strong. They had a varied diet of lean meat, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. They did not have the chronic diseases of civilization that plague us today, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and many cancers. If you could make it through the gauntlet of childhood and avoid an accident, an infection, or a predator, you could be a healthy and active 50-year-old. For tens of thousands of years, this was the pattern of human life. A low average life expectancy due to high infant mortality, but a potential to live into what we would consider middle or even old age. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything changed. Humans started to give up the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and began to practice agriculture. This was the Neolithic Revolution. We started planting crops and domesticating animals. We started living in permanent settlements. You would think this would have made life better and longer. A stable food supply sounds great, but the evidence suggests the exact opposite. For the first several thousand years of agriculture, human health and lifespan actually got worse. How is that possible? First, the diet became much less varied. Instead of eating dozens of different plants and animals, early farmers relied on just a few staple crops like wheat, rice, or corn. This led to nutritional deficiencies. Their diet was high in carbohydrates, which led to a massive increase in dental cavities, something rarely seen in hunter-gatherers. Second, living in one place meant living with your own waste. Sanitation was non-existent. This created a breeding ground for diseases. People were also living in close contact with their domesticated animals, which allowed animal diseases to jump the species barrier to humans. Measles, smallpox, tuberculosis, and the flu all have their origins in domesticated animals. These new crowd diseases swept through early farming communities. Skeletons from this period show the strain. People were shorter than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. They had more signs of nutritional stress and infectious disease. The average life expectancy at birth actually went down. More people were living in one place, so populations grew, but the life of an individual farmer was often harder and shorter than that of a hunter-gatherer. It took a very, very long time for the benefits of agriculture to outweigh the negatives in terms of health. For thousands of years, into the Roman era and the Middle Ages, the basic pattern remained the same. Life expectancy at birth hovered in the 20s or 30s because so many children died. If you were a Roman and you survived to age 10, you could expect to live to your late 40s. It was not until the 19th and 20th centuries that things really began to change dramatically. The invention of modern medicine, sanitation, vaccines, and antibiotics is what truly transformed human lifespan. In just a couple of hundred years, we have almost eliminated the infant and childhood mortality that plagued our ancestors for their entire existence. A life expectancy at birth of 80 years, which is common in developed countries today, would have been completely unimaginable for virtually all of human history. We are living through a unique moment. So, to come back to the original question, how long did the first humans live? They lived short lives on average, maybe 30 to 35 years, but this number is a statistical illusion created by the tragic deaths of so many of their children. If they were lucky enough and strong enough to become adults, they lived much longer. They could live to be 50, 60, or in rare cases, even older. They experienced old age with its aches and pains, but also with its wisdom. They cared for their sick and their elderly, valuing the knowledge they held. Their lives were not short, nasty, and brutish. Their lives were hard. They were full of danger, pain, and loss. But they were also full of cooperation, care, and the resilience that allowed our species to survive and eventually cover the entire planet. The image of the caveman who dies at 30 is a caricature. The reality is the much more complex and interesting story of a species that fought for every year of its life, and in doing so, laid the groundwork for the long lives we take for granted today.